get a new pointer, okay?
Okay.
2 more minutes.
This is one of the examples that shows you being an academic is worse than, well, if you're a surgeon or if you're a firefighter, you have to be ready for anything. If you're an academic, it's even worse.
İyi oldu. Aslında benimki Murat Hoca'ydı zaten olmayacak. Murat Hoca ister istemez. Yüz yüze temas mı? Olmaması daha iyi zaten. Yüz yüze temas mı? Murat Hoca kampüste arasında kullanması neye iyi bakmayacak?
Hayat bakıyorum.
Yüz yüze olması daha iyi.
Amina. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Is this research method?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
Today is a legend about research methods. Next week, you're back to real research methods.
Daha önce öğrencisi olmasa anlardım. Anladım. Biz böyle sormuyoruz. Sınıf vardı, herkes alıyordu. Communication'da, çarpıcık dersler, bütün 300 kişi vardı sınıfta. Altı beş kızı. Herkesin işi. Testi de mi? Türkçe mi?
Yani hiç böyle bir şey olmadı. Hiçbir zaman.
Bunu da keşke testsiz olsa.
Mesela değiştiriyor, ondan da kaynaklanıyormuş.
Sorry about that. So, apparently there is only one pointer, yet it is currently used by a student.
Oh, no,
depending,
it's not a big deal.
So,
I can use
I
the
can
mouse.
actually assist you here, but I'm
No,
not
no,
sure.
no.
Would you be fine with that?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let me introduce you to the class first. Hey everyone. Okay. This is a sweet surprise for you. Okay. We have invited Dr. Florian Fansik. He is coming from Romania. He is here with the Erasmus program, I guess, right? So he was so kind to accept our offer. So today, instead of a lecture, we will hear Dr. Fasnick's work. So this is my class, research methods class. I think we are like half and half international and Turkish students here. So the floor is yours.
Okay.
Have you
Thank
started to record? Is it
Yeah,
recording right now?
I guess so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. So, not only that I'm with the Erasmus Plus, I'm actually Erasmus Plus squared because I'm visiting with an Erasmus Plus teaching, and I'm also in an Erasmus Plus project. And the thing that I will be talking about today is largely related to that Erasmus Plus project. So, okay, Stories about Scientific Research is like a book project that would relate to that Erasmus Plus project that I was telling you about. And, okay, just two or three words about me. So I come from Romania. I did my undergrad, God, like a really long time ago. And 1997, I got my BA, went to CEU for 1 year for a master's. Then went to Rochester in the States. The thought was I'll finish a PhD there, but it was way too quantitative for me. Was the wrong person in the right place. And then I moved to places that were more friendly with the non-quant heads. That was University of Illinois, and I got my PhD there in 2008. And then I returned home, back to Cluj in Romania. So in the future textbook, Stories about Scientific Research, it will be a book kind of research methods, but more like the process, like how scientists do research. And two of the future chapters, well, these two are not mine, there's lots of really interesting and very good research. There's not that many that I can think of when I'll be like, wow, when I grow up, which will never happen, this is the stuff, something like that I would like to do, to write. And so there's a paper on how the introduction of electronic voting machines led to significant improvement in infant health. And the setting is Brazil. And if you think your first reaction is, okay, I'm not sure what that guy was smoking when he was writing that, what you did smoke right before class, but I want some. Well, you'd be surprised. Once you hear the story, I think it will start to make sense, no matter how surprising it may sound like. And then the ghost map is actually an example from the history of medicine. The treatment of cholera, to be more specific. And well, there'll be a joke forthcoming, but once we get to the ghost map. And I'll have a bunch of examples, at least one. We'll see how it goes, maybe another one, from my own research. Not because it's that, the best research in the world, but just because I'm more familiar with it, so I'll be able to answer questions and to discuss, better. So that. Okay. And at the very end, I have a few recommendations. Make of that what you will. A few books that I think are really cool. Anyways, so this is the project, and that's, Center for the Study of Democracy is where I'm technically employed. Center for the Study of Democracy in the Department of Political Science at Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj, Romania. So my official position is as a researcher employed by that Center for the Study of Democracy. And this is the general idea of the project, that how both civic education and scientific education, among other beneficial effects, have a positive impact on democracy. And they reinforce one another as well, civic education and scientific education, that is. Okay, that's the general idea. Is any of you familiar with Freakonomics? Okay, that's also a really good book. Freakonomics, it's kind of a play word, you know, it's a freak and economics. It's Levitt, I think, is an economist at Chicago. Is the author, and it's well, freaky economics. So that will be for the general public. That's a book project. Anyways, so the first, So the third example that I'll be discussing later on, in addition to the electronic voting machines and infant health from Brazil, the ghost map. It will be something on electoral competition in Ukraine. Like 10 years ago, the colleague of mine, future head of the department, he's the head of the department, political science department now, he wasn't at the time, and he was telling me that I should study some other stuff other than Ukraine, which I thought, well, okay, I thought I do something else as well, but who knows, maybe Ukraine is a relevant topic as well. Didn't hear that much criticism from him more recently. So looked like it wasn't, after all, such an uninspired choice. Okay, electronic voting machines and infant health. So we are talking about Brazil in roughly a decade, from 1994 to 2002, and you'll see exactly why. Those specific. So how do we get from the introduction of electronic voting machines to infant health? Oh, Thomas Fujiwara is the author of that piece. I'm trying to give a good summary today. So fortunately, he's not around, so he cannot say, well, this is not a very good summary. So, I can say whatever if you like. Okay, so think of what happened in Brazil, and we'll see more specific what, as a kind of a natural experiment. Yeah, natural experiment is where the researcher does not do the actual manipulation, something is going on in the real world, and he takes that, but it really looks like an actual experiment. Okay, so as you know, Brazil is a huge country, is very unequal, well, horizontally, so to say, across regions, and vertically across social groups. There's a very high illiteracy rate, and has a very, very complicated electoral system. And well, writing candidate was, I think, back in the old days. I'm not sure it will work now, and you'll see why. So anyway, when you're illiterate and you have zillion of candidates, and the choices are either you write down the name of your favorite candidate, or there's like 4 or 5 digit numbers corresponding to that candidate, well, that's a bit of a problem. And back in the old days, when they were still using paper ballots, up to 30% of ballots cast were invalid. And what he had in Brazil in the 1990s was a gradual introduction of electronic voting machines. And that's also a really cool accident for the purpose of the natural experiment, because it's like you can compare, if it's gradual, you can compare places where you have electronic voting machines with places where you don't have those yet. Yeah. Okay, so this is what a sample, an example of what an old ballot would look like. Right? And you have to write the name of the candidate, your preferred candidate, or a 4 or 5 digit number. And now, this is an example of how the interface, I guess is the word, of the electronic voting machine look like. So perhaps, I don't know about you, to me intuitively, it didn't sound so obvious that introducing electronic voting machines would make things any easier. But they do. In totally different context, there's a huge literature on the introduction of mobile phones in less developed countries, not smartphones. Well, I eventually, probably one of the last persons who got a smartphone a couple of months ago, but I still have no idea how it works. I'm talking about classical, old generation mobile phones that the interface will look pretty much like this. And empirically, it's been proven that illiterate people would take like 5-10 minutes to learn how to use one of these. So it's really simple, yes. Okay, you don't have it this yet. This is at the end. So this would be blank, yeah. You type in the number, yeah. And once you type 92111, the name of the candidate, the party, and his or her picture will come up. If you're happy with the results, you press the green button, yes, you confirm, and you're done. If not, you press the red button, which is actually orange, and you start over again. And what about the results? Lo and behold, what we have here. So, on the vertical axis is the share of that's valid votes, yes. So, 1994 election was the last election where all Brazil used paper ballots. Yeah. And here is how large the electoral district, if you will, was, right? So, number of registered voters. The happy accident for the purpose of our natural experiment was that in 1998, it was the first election where some places in Brazil used electronic voting machines. These were the places in Brazil using electronic voting machines. And these are those that still use paper ballots. And as you can see, there's a really big difference. Yeah? So here you have very few invalid ballots. And finally, in 2002, when you have electronic voting machines everywhere, you have very few invalid ballots in all of Brazil. Now, when I first read this paper, it was a number of years ago. It wasn't yet published. It was like a working paper. I was already blown away. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I mean, it's already really important, right? If you say, well, democracy is every vote should count, even if this didn't make any other difference, just number of invalid ballots, this is still it's an important result. Now, did it make any impact any further? And I'll keep it brief. The rest of the story, here's how we get from electronic voting machines to infant health. Right? So essentially, when you have very few invalid ballots, that led to the effective enfranchisement of lower socioeconomic status voters, right? I mean, take a wild guess. Clearly, it wasn't, people with higher education, upper class people would be more likely to cast invalid ballots. It would be people from lower social classes. This led to an increased support for left-wing parties and candidates. And it was really cool because you could compare, again, in the first four years, you only had this in some places in Brazil and not others. And in those places where you had electronic voting machines, you see increased spending for healthcare. Even this part of the story to me was really cool. I was like, well, he was really smart knowing where to look for. Yeah, maybe you think, well, left-wing parties would be more likely to invest in education, so to say, which surely is really important. Well, you'd probably see the effects, the results in 20 years from now, right? Well, where would you see immediate results, even in healthcare? In most areas of healthcare, probably you won't see immediate results either, yeah? Might see, I don't know, increase in life expectancy 20, 30 years down the road. One place where you might see immediate results was here. So, in those places that had electronic voting machines and you had all this, you'd see that lower socioeconomic status future mothers will make way more access to healthcare. For middle class and upper class future mothers, there was no effect whatsoever, only for lower socioeconomic status pregnant women. And finally, from here, we get to here. Yeah. From the introduction of electronic voting machines to decrease incidence of low-weight births, which the whole literature on health says this is one of the most important predictors of your health for the remainder of your life. So, and again, I don't know how much you like this. Well, if you don't like it that much, it's probably my fault that I didn't say the story as well as Fujiwara could have. To me, this was one of the best pieces of research I've ever read in my life. Okay, and now, here's the good news. We will talk about Joe Snow in the next 15, 20 minutes or whatever. What's the bad news? Well, the bad news is that it's not that Joe Snow, it's this Joe Snow. Well, it's good news for me, actually. The real story, to me, is even cooler than the imaginary story. Joe Snow was an English doctor who lived in 19th century. He practiced in various places, but the story is in London. In mid-19th century, there was one of the biggest public health problems was cholera, right? And there were two, I'm not even sure if I would say competing theory is the right word, because they weren't really competing. It was John Snow, the proponent of germ theory, and there was everybody else, all the medical establishment with the miasma theory. There was something in the air. They were not sure what, but there was something bad in the air that caused cholera. And to make it worse, Jon Snow had this instinct that it's not something in the air, it's something in the water. The problem for him was that the microscope was not invented yet. So he could prove this kind of indirectly, said various things that were consistent with his theory, that's something in the water, and inconsistent with the miasma theory, that there's something in the air, but he couldn't prove this directly. Now, the problem at the time, and I think that's very relevant to our story, because of miasma theory, the public health recommendations and the public health policies were that, okay, there's something bad in the air. So you might be familiar with the literature on public health and sanitation and everything in the 19th century in large cities. It's not a pretty picture, anyways. And so what they would do to get rid of bad smells, whatever it was bad in the air, they would take all the refuse and dump it into River Thames, which was the main source of water for London at the time. So they were thinking they were taking care of the problem, and what they were doing was obviously they were making it much worse. And the ghost map is widely seen as the second coolest statistical illustration ever in the history. I will show you later what might be the coolest one. So, what's the story? This is the map of Soho, and Dr. Snow, Jon Snow, did kind of a, I'm not sure what to call it, perhaps medical anthropology work. He literally traced all the cases. And not only that, kind of the history of the cases. The blue flags are water sources. And the expression of the interocular traumatic test is when, like the evidence hits you between the eyes. Like, there seems to be something really fishy with this water pump, which was famous. It was the best source of water in the whole London. People would come from distances to get water from that pump. And what happened was that there was this infant, really young girl who got sick. Her parents dumped the diapers in the refuse collection. They were living literally a couple of meters away from that water pump. Clearly, the water that got into the water pump. And this, as you can see, the closer you get to these are the red ones. Red ones are the modified version of the map. In the initial, these are deaths, right? The closer you get to the water pump, the higher was the number of deaths. So, and okay, this is the same map, but different version of it. It's the bigger the red dots, higher the number of deaths, but it's the same. Okay, so this is the water pump, and this is the house where that young girl died. It was the first case in that epidemic. Okay, another cool part of the story is that we actually have also in this story, in this example, a natural experiment, which, although it's very different, in some important respects, is quite similar to the previous story. And you'll see why. Okay, so in London, at the time, there was not one water company supplier. There were various companies. And the distribution of customers was kind of random, actually. So it wasn't like this neighborhood would have one water supplier and the other next neighborhood would have a different one. It would be kind of, I don't know. Here in this room, half of us are on Vodafone and the other half are in, I don't know, Orange. I'm just saying just because Orange is like Vodafone in Romania. I have no idea how it is in Turkey or other places. So, what to say? So, here's two of the water companies at the time. And here's the area where both were providing. Yeah. So, I'll get water from Lambeth, and your colleague will get it from Southwark and Vauxhall. And what was the natural experiment? Well, unfortunately, I couldn't find the numbers for the life of me, but all the literature, you can check it out. So don't take my word for that. Say that in the 1849 epidemic, where both companies had London intake, that is to say, they would take water from Thames inside London. Yeah, so it was already very polluted. The death rate was very similar for the two companies. Now, what happened was that after 1849 and right before the 1853-54 epidemic, that's the epidemic that John Snow did his work study. That's on the graph that you've seen. Lambeth moved the source of water upstream. Yeah? So didn't get into London, so clearly it was much cleaner. So we have at least the results for that epidemic. And as you can see, it differs by an order of magnitude, really. So, yeah, if I was Joe Snow, I guess I would get really frustrated, talking to my colleagues. Damn it! Just look at these numbers. Can't you see it? I mean, bad air. If it's bad air, it should be equally bad for all London inhabitants, not just from one versus the other. But anyway, okay. So just a small side note. I was telling you that the ghost map was the second coolest statistical map graph in history. This is considered by many the coolest graph ever. It's a map of Napoleon's military campaign in Russia. Well, it was published in 1861. Why is it so cool? It's because you have one graph, but you have like 6 pieces of information, yeah? So you have the geography, you have the time, yeah? This is how the army moved. Here you have the temperatures during the campaign. You have the time and how the army moved, and the size of the army. Yeah. Started with like 400,000 soldiers and ended up back with like 10,000. Yeah. Typically, if I make a graph and I manage to put 3 variables in a 2-dimensional graph, I'm very happy. Like, wow, I'm really smart. Yeah, okay. So this would be kind of an example, way more recent example. Kind of similar with, putting various pieces of information. You're like, well, there's not really that much information, yeah? It's only an X and a Y. It only says that, well, there tends to be, well, clear and positive relation, not one-to-one, but still between spending on healthcare and life expectancy. We also have Turkey here, so not Romania. And USA is an outlier. And then you may come up with various stories and explanation. Yeah, well, maybe there's more, I don't know what, perhaps minorities in US have lower life expectancy, which even if it's the case, raises other questions. Or maybe it's just, that might be the conservative story. Yes, it's because we have all these pharmaceutical companies in the US which are so much better than the rest of the world. And they, there's a lot of spending on healthcare, and the rest of the world, which doesn't invest that much, benefits from it. This is why we see the discrepancy. But an adapted version of this would be to put time into the graph. So this is movement in time, like in the history of Napoleon's military campaign in Russia. And lo and behold, as we can see, US in the 1970s. So, anyways, in the 1970s, had pretty much the same starting point as the rest. Yeah, didn't spend significantly more. In fact, spent about the same as the rest of the world, and they have the same life expectancy. And then we see a divergence here. Spending goes way up in the US, and life expectancy goes way up in the rest of the world. Which, again, well, that would be a fascinating topic for study and discussion, but that was not my goal here. It was just to give you yet another illustration of how appearances can be deceiving, and you always better off taking a second look at the data and the actual world. Okay, so finally, this would be my attempt to make a personal contribution to not just telling you about these great scholars and statisticians and you, but an example of my own research on Ukraine. Now, starting with a kind of preliminary observation. So, if you think that's kind of universal, almost universal, not universal, but almost. So, if one party or one candidate gets lots of votes in one place, in one election, you'd expect them to get lots of votes in the same place in the following election. Or if there are fewer, then you also expect them to get few votes. Next one. So, for instance, not that I'm a very big fan of Trump, but if I would say Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden instead, I say, yeah, well, but maybe there's some differences. Well, Trump was, unfortunately for the US and the rest of the world, was the same in 2016 and 2020. So, in places where he got very few votes in 2016, he also got very few votes. So it's almost a perfect predictor, yeah? Correlation, for those of you who've done already some statistics, is really 0.99, so almost perfect. Now, what about Ukraine? What's interesting about Ukraine? Ukraine, in the 1990s, we have the same candidate, Leonid Kuchma. In 1994, he was the challenger. In 1990, he was the incumbent. And these are the Ukrainian oblasts, kind of like states in the US, regions, what have you. There's 27 of them. Crimea was still part of Ukraine at the time, obviously. And there's a very strong but negative correlation between the two. Like, wow, that's kind of interesting. What's going on? Now, if you're thinking about the left-right dimensions, okay, this is my mapping, but if you were to ask experts in Ukrainian politics, I think if we're only talking about left and right, they would pretty much agree. That's, Kuchma, was Kuchma in 1994 and 99, and didn't move much along this dimension. And Kravchuk was the incumbent president, who ran against Kuchma. Well, that's logically I should say Kuchma ran against Kravchuk in 1994. And Piotr Simonenko was the leader of the Communist Party, which you might guess where he was on left-right terms. So if you think about it in these terms, it gets even more confusing. Okay, why? What happened? What explained the difference between the two elections? Well, surprise, surprise. In Ukraine, nationalism and language plays a very important role. So if we map these candidates along two dimensions rather than one, and we add to the left-right dimension Russophile versus Ukrainian nationalist dimension, Kravchuk, the incumbent president in 1994, was pretty left-wing, but he was a Ukrainian nationalist. Kuchma was an ethnic Ukrainian who could barely speak Ukrainian. He was like, yes, I have this problem, and it's a problem that I share with half of Ukraine. And Simonenko, well, obviously, he was at the other extreme compared to Kravchuk. He was the leader of the Communist Party, who, I'm not sure if they were essentially saying, well, Ukraine should be part of Russia, or at least Eastern Ukraine, but they were saying, well, Russian should be on an equal footing with Ukrainian, if not even higher status. So, if that is, if that is the case, perhaps I should have added an additional graph. Well, Western Ukrainian nationalists in 1994 would vote for Kravchuk, obviously, whereas same Western Ukrainian nationalists, but the choice was between Kuchma, and be like, well, what can you do? Think of oh, you're way too young to even, might have been in either kindergarten or not even born. And my math fails me. There was this election in 2002 in France, where in the runoff the choice was between Chirac and Jean-Marie Le Pen, Le Pen Senior. So if you're on the left, you'd be like, well, oh God, I'll vote with the crook rather than the fascist. So it was kind of the similar story over here. Okay, yeah. This is a side note. If any of you find my spiel today remotely interesting, the follow-up when the forthcoming textbook will come up. No, yeah, and the Tableau companion, and you have no idea talking about. Do I have? Yeah, Tableau companion. Now this map is a replication of the map that you've seen earlier, that is made using the same data, and Tableau Public, which is a freeware made by one of my students back home. He's a doctoral student. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the geographical information. So in case you're wondering if there was Sony Interactive Entertainment in mid-19th century in London, no, there wasn't. It's just that, well, needed a map from that, because it's like a specific format that you have to use. But anyways, the idea is that you can do such cool maps yourself, and it takes way less time than you think. So the book, when it will come up, will also have a Tableau companion. So all the maps and graphs that will be in the book will have, well, I will replicate everything. And there will be a Tableau companion telling you, well, how can you make this map of Ukraine? How can you make this graph of 19th century, the 19th century cholera epidemic in London, and so on and so forth. And you'll have PowerPoint presentations and all the data sets, and there will be a YouTube companion, kind of what I'm telling you here, but it's the 1 hour summary of the whole book. There will be like a YouTube presentation of each chapter, and also a YouTube tutorial of how to replicate all the maps and graphs and everything in there. Okay. Oh, and just a few examples of the cool things that you can do in Tableau Public. If we have a good internet connection, if not, just for free, ideally. No. Oh. Oh, sure. Oh, never mind. I was with Zoom and the share screen thing in my head, so you can probably. Is anyone less technologically challenged than can I show you what I'm seeing now on the internet or not? Well, anyways, never mind.
Actually, I think you might be even savior than me. So would any of you come for an
So now, I did a click. I did a click on this, and this opened a browser.
Is it links there?
So,
You have to have a hyperlink there. If you have a hyperlink.
But no. It's just that I'm not sure.
I
If
see.
I'm not sure if
they
they.
show up. I see.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the internet connection is.
No, it is.
good.
I think
But it
we do have
should be.
internet
No.
connection.
I did check it, the link this morning, and it did work. It did open the. Let's see.
So maybe
Refresh
if we
it.
try right clicking and Like,
No, the browser is already open here, okay, with
it's
the link
not
in it.
showing there?
Well,
It's not shown here right now, but like, it doesn't open any contact.
it's not that important. It was kind of cool.
And
You'll see.
hyperlink is not
well,
working properly. Then hyperlink is not working properly because
Uh,
we have to
well-
connect the hyperlink first and then.
Yeah, no, but it should have, because I did check the link this morning and it did work on my laptop. Well, anyways, it's would have been cool. This is a map at locality level that shows you vaccination rate. So it had like 3,000 cases. So, and first time when I saw something like this, I thought this will take like a 1 year sabbatical to. It literally takes like 10 or 15 minutes. So it's really cool, and it's something worth thinking about it. Anyways, so anyway, let me go back.
Oh,
What?
she just turned off.
What? Oops.
Yeah, it's on.
I have no idea
Me neither.
what happened. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay.
We're back.
So we're back. So
You
here
were-
we have. Let me give this. It will take like 10 minutes, and then we can have a break.
Okay.
So, 10 books that to me are really cool one way or another. So this one have an examples that we probably won't get with. It was kind of backup example if we have enough time to discuss other. So democracy for real. There's one chapter, for instance, in this book, which is called, well, I don't think it's called that's any, the draft paper that was the origin for that had an even cooler title. It was called Blind Retrospection, Why Shark Attacks Are Bad for Democracy. And the argument of that paper, now chapter in the book, is that there were some shark attacks in 1916 that had an impact on voting behavior. 1916 was presidential election year. If any of you, well, probably most of you, and most likely all of you are familiar with the movie Jaws.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, the movie is inspired from the events discussed in the chapter. So those were real life events. They actually did happen in New Jersey, of all places. And anyways, this is the book. I will have a really important question for you during the break to see how far can I'd be able to go with the follow-up. So this is the book. If any of you find any of this useful, interesting, I would have already sent the PowerPoint. It's just that it's huge. So instead, I'll probably try to shrink it, or put a link on my Dropbox that will be, free to any of you who wants to access it. Okay, red state, blue state. Now this is one of the really cool results discussed in this book. Perhaps the coolest part of it is that you have a bit of a paradox. Okay, I didn't, sorry, not my laptop, but my PowerPoint crashed this morning. So some of the things that I was planning to have in here, they're not here. So I'm missing the actual illustration. So I'll just do, I don't know, the belly dancing and tell you what the results are. There's the, in the US, income is a very powerful predictor of voting for Republicans at the individual level. Yeah? Richer Americans tend to vote Republican. Now, I don't think you've got, they're probably not familiar with the ecological fallacy.
Do you guys know
Does-
what ecological fallacy?
Does that ring a bell? Okay. Think of, say, I don't know, France. Yeah. So let's say in France, the higher the number of migrants in a locality or department, the higher the vote for the National Front. So, would you conclude that immigrants, migrants vote for the National Front? Well, hell no. So that will be ecological fallacy. Yeah? Taking a result at the aggregate level and inferring something at the individual level. Now this, what I'm telling you now, it's kind of more interesting and a bit counterintuitive. You'll be like, well, if something is true at the individual level, clearly it will also be true at the aggregate level. Well, it's not in this context. Poorer American states vote Republican, richer American states vote with the Democratic Party. So what you see at the individual level, not only that it's not replicated at the aggregate level, it's the opposite. And they offer a really cool and statistical explanation for it. So, but I'll send an update, well, not just the PowerPoint, also with additional resources, and you'll see what the cool statistical explanation is. Interesting. Now, some of you, so my understanding is that at least some of you are not just enrolled in this class, enrolled in this program, are your IR major, and they're doing also international relations, right? Okay. So this might be an interesting book. It is a bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously, as you can imagine, but it's also kind of cool. So it's not just it's imagining, you know, if you had like zombies, how, you know, the realist, idealist, structural, whatever theories you have in international relations that I'm really clueless about. So each chapter is something like that. So it's a kind of unorthodox book. Well, most of the books that I will present you today, there are not that many to begin with. Kind of. Okay, this is a methods book. So so Anthony Gierzinski, or whatever the right pronunciation is an American professor. Had a sample of 1,200 college students from the US, and the whole book is about research methods, really basic, right? But the data that he's using is that data set, and the arguments, the results, the overall result is that the more exposed to Harry Potter literature, movies, but especially the books, you are, the more pro-democratic you become as an adult. So, and the follow-up to this, so this was published in 2013, when President Trump was not yet president. There's a follow-up. In 2016, there was another American professor who published a very short piece, arguing kind of the same thing, but more contextualized. The focus was on Donald Trump, and the argument was the more exposed you are to Harry Potter, the more you disliked Donald Trump. She actually does call Donald Trump Voldemort in one place. So, anyway. Okay, this is yet another really cool book. Any of you familiar with Hans Rosling? He died, unfortunately, a few years ago, but there's still not just a book. There's has a kind of like tableau public that I was mentioning earlier. Tableau public is a freeware. There's also a professional version, but I think you can work, literally make a living with tableau public, doing professional with the free version for, like forever. So you can download it. All you need is tableau public data sets. It's freeware, so you don't have to, do what you have to do with other types of software, or being really rich and having like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for the actual thing. Anyway, has the Gapminder is called. It's kind of like tableau public, a really cool illustration. It's also freeware. You can download it, and you can do all kind of cool graphs and maps and everything. The book is using that. If you search Hans Rosling on YouTube, there's like hundreds of really cool videos about him presenting illustration and talking about statistics. Okay, this is the book telling the story of the John Snow and the 19th cholera epidemic. Okay. This is not, well, these are two books by the same author, Art of the Statistics, How to Learn from Data. The first example in the book, in the introductory chapter, is this one. Maybe some of you saw it just because I've seen it in at least one TV show talking about, well, whatever, History Channel, some channel of science, I do not recall. This is really famous. So, Harold Shipman was a general practitioner, doctor in the 1970s, 80s, something like that. In England, he was very good, well respected, and guess what? He killed hundreds of his elderly patients, and nobody guessed it just because who would have thought? And eventually he made a mistake. So the mother of one of his patients who died was a solicitor, I guess, some legal position. And not only that, the will of, was it her mother? I think it was her father, was changed, oddly enough, in favor of Shipman. And then Shipman was a really big fan of technology, but it wasn't that technology savvy. Didn't realize that everything you do on your computer leaves like a trace. So when the mother, the daughter of this patient who died became suspicious and alerted the police, they saw that the alleged will was written after his death, that patient, and then they looked backwards and compared. So the thinner or the lighter line is percentage of death for other general practitioners. This is the line for shipments patients. So here we see the couple of hours after shipment visited his patients. So it's like literally half of his patients died 1 hour or 2 hours after he visited them. Like, okay, that doesn't make much sense, does it? It's kind of suspicious. So anyway, that's the start, the beginning of the book, yeah, start of statistics. And there's like, well, it's not an actual follow-up, well, it's a follow-up in a sense. This is the book. Well, I have pretty much all of what I've shown you, but this is the only one that I carried with me because I thought I'll have something to read on. So it's COVID by numbers, making sense of the pandemic data. So it really is, talking about statistics, illustrating it with data about COVID. And I think this is the last, but certainly not least. Oh, sorry. These I'm proud to brag about, although I'm not sure why I'm bragging about because it's not my merit. But anyways, Jerry Monk was my first advisor at Illinois. Rich Schneider, I knew him a bit. He was also a professor at Illinois, but I didn't take any class with him. This is a huge book. It's about 800 pages long, as it's really interviews with all these famous political scientists. And it's not that well known, the book, I mean, which is really surprising to me. I thought it's such a fantastic book. I mean, if you look at the names over here, probably by now about half of them are not with us any longer. And the very few reviews that I've seen on Amazon, there were only 4 or 5 of them. With one exception, they were all 5 stars. The 3 stars review was this lady, and I erased her name because it's not about her, it's about the idea. Because she was complaining about this not being a genuine academic book with lots of graphs and stats, and to me it was, bloody hell. That's exactly the point. I mean, 99.9% of the books in poli-sci are that, That's why this book is so cool. It interviews the life and the experience of all these fantastic scholars. So anyways, should we take a break?
Do you have one more? Because I think that was the 9th book, or this is
No,
the
it's
last
8.
one. This is the 10th one. Okay, that was
The 10th one. I think it's. Oh no, it is. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Let me. I had the impression that it was. No. I thought the 10th book would come later.
Yeah. Because
That was the original plan. Anyways, okay. So data list and help me. Christian Rudder is a statistician, but his job is at a company, is a dating company in the US. So they have data for millions of people, yeah? And so they would have variables for all the respondents, such as age and the age of the ideal date. Now, if you were to take a guess, what do you think? Would age be a good predictor of the ideal date or not?
Can you repeat it again? You said
So,
age is
yeah, if you know the age of one specific respondent,
Yes.
would you be in a better position to know what's the ideal? So they say, I'm a male, 35 years old male. My ideal date that I'm looking for in this dating would be this age.
Yeah.
No.
So,
Halfway actually.
Hmm?
It will be halfway. It's not the whole picture. It can't be the whole picture. I would say.
no, obviously, unless we're doing anthropology, you never get
Yeah, sure.
the whole picture. But
Yeah.
even broadly speaking, well, the answer I was looking for, well, I have no idea what my reaction was. I was reading it. Anyways, it was years back, so probably I didn't have a good answer. But the answer is, it depends. It depends on what? It depends on whether, and this is kind of the, all the bad cliches that you have about what?
Things are interrelated with each other. So
In what sense?
in all sense, things are interrelated.
No,
with each other,
no,
so-
right. No, but that's the complicated answer. There's also,
Yeah, sure.
uh,
I understand.
We can see patterns.
yeah.
Let's put it that.
So, if you're making fun of males, here we have the data too. Okay, these are females for the time being. So for females, age is not the perfect predictor, but almost. So here are respondents of 20 years age, the average ideal date would be 23. For 33 year, one would be male around 30s, and so on. Yeah. As age goes up, the age of the ideal date goes up. And here's the data for males. It doesn't matter if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, or your 50s, the ideal date is around 20. Anyways, that was actually more fun.
So can we say that men are more into physical appearance and age? It's always-
Apparently, so it's not like stories about X and Y. These are like millions of respondents.
Yeah.
But then again,
It's
these are
always-
American respondents. Obviously, in the rest of the world, it's a completely different story. Yeah, right. Anyways, okay. Let's take a break.
Okay, perfect. That was a fascinating lecture. Thank you so much for your presentation. We are taking a break for about, say, 20 minutes. Okay? 20 to 25 minutes. Okay? So please be back by 3:50. Would be like 18 minutes. No, that would be like, yeah, it would be like 18 minutes. So 55.
Okay.
Okay? 3:55. Okay?
Okay.
5 to 4. Please be back. We will have, I think, a shorter session of maybe discussions, questions, and answers. Okay? We can kind of like share our ideas. Okay? Together. Okay. See you soon. See you recording. Yes.
Oh, yeah.